Hello.
Hello, Stephen.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Just want to make sure that we're recording. I think it is. So back in electricity Eskom time.
Yes, I was curious to see how disappointed I was when the electricity came back on, actually. Like, wow, what a great opportunity to just get out and do something that wasn't electricity dependent.
Yeah, I know. Forced downtime.
Yeah, much appreciated.
So, Stephen, we're going to do a little bit of a conversation around the idea of Tantra and your journey with it, just as an introduction to the topic. Do you want to give us a little bit of background about you and your journey of it and what it means for you?
Sure, try and keep it short. It's as I look back, I think sometimes I struggle with what Tantra is exactly because I think my journey with it began way before I knew the term or I'd come across any concepts relating to it. Um, I think I was always in a position where, certainly from the perspective of sexuality, was very interested in that, very interested in the way people related and related around the sexuality. So even as a teenager, that openness revealed itself, and that I had a lot of people talking to me about very personal things, sharing with me, confiding, getting advice, and I saw this. I saw this in later life happening at parties, and at some point panicked a little bit and thought, oh, maybe I should get some skill here. I don't necessarily know if I'm damaging people in terms of what I'm saying or reflecting back to them, which took me on to doing a course in counseling, which was, I specifically didn't want to do anything that was head based. And this was body based. It was working with movement, working with sound, expression, finding ways of seeing oneself and becoming personally empowered. And it was a very natural step from that into Tantra, which is also very much about working with the body and the energy of the body. And by that stage, I'd already begun exploring sexuality, um, just in terms of my own journey there, realizing that there was some things very drastically wrong. Um, way I understand it now is I wasn't in integrity. There was things that I was saying to people and thoughts that I was having, desires and fantasies, and um, the reality of my experience was something quite different. If I encountered anything that looked vaguely exciting in terms of any ideas that I had, I was running very quickly in the opposite direction. And I think I spent a good 5 years just avoiding any encounter and becoming very painfully aware that at the same time I had such a strong desire for it. And I wanted to know what was going on. I wanted to know why I was feeling so bad about how many of my relationships were working out and what the underlying dynamics of that was. And as I started digging deep into it, um, I just started discovering a lot that I was not entirely happy with as a sexual being. I realized that that aspect of myself was very repressed, very judged, and I was carrying a lot of ideas and opinions from culture, from my parenting, that weren't necessarily my own. And that began a process of going, okay, well, what is my own? Where do I get to make the choice here? And the only place to make that choice was to go into an experience and to feel it and go, okay, that doesn't feel so good for me. And oh, yeah, that feels absolutely great. And then sometimes to realize, wait, this has absolutely nothing to do with this at all. Um, it's about how I carry myself in the world. Might look like it's sexuality, but actually, this is about how I live my entire life. And I think when I started realizing that, again, it took me back to a younger age where somehow I knew that. There was a sense of, wow, we've got this life, and it is extraordinary. It certainly has the potential to be that. How do I do that? How do I meet it fully? And I was learning that I wasn't. I was holding myself back. I was a shy boy, running away from things.
So, Stephen, what is Tantra in your opinion? Like, what is it? I mean, for those people that don't have any idea.
My preferred answer, and I think there's many answers, but my preferred one is that question of how do I engage with my life as fully as possible. And if that doesn't sound like it's Tantra, I can position it slightly differently. How do I make love with life? How do I turn every experience that I encounter into something that engages all of my senses and allows me to feel it all very deeply so that I'm not skimming the surface of anything? And sure, that can be sex on one level, certainly, but on another level where many people will relate quite well is, for example, is food. Now, food can be a very unconscious thing. We just eat because we have to, because that's what we do 3 times a day, if that's your schedule on it. We can easily be rushing from one place to another and gobble down food. We don't even taste it. We don't even remember the experience. It's a missed opportunity. That's a reflection of life. Since we do it on a daily basis, why not do it in such a way that we absolutely love every mouthful that we put into our body and experience all the tastes and the colors and the textures and the smells and get involved in the preparation of it and start to appreciate whether what I'm putting into me is of quality or not. And something for me in that is what Tantra is about, on a big level anyway.
What are, I mean, other than food, I mean, how else might that look in terms of, I mean, so we're going to run a course together and you're going to be introducing some of these concepts. So where do we start with it? I mean, how do you begin? How do you help people begin?
So the beginning of that is the noticing. When we're rushing and not paying attention to what we're doing, we're missing out. And sometimes what that takes is slowing down. Very simple in a sense. We slow down and we start to take notice of what's happening. How am I walking into this room? When I walk into the room, what feelings do I have? Am I aware of that? How am I holding my body? Am I constricted? Am I open and available to what I'm going to meet? Is there a story playing in my head as to what I might be expecting that's causing some sort of fear? Am I projecting that into the room? Little things like that. This noticing of what's going on for us is a crucial aspect, because when we start to notice what's going on, we get the opportunity to discern how it is that we move forward in our lives, what choices we're making. Are we being ruled in a sense by unconscious fears and the stories and the beliefs that we carry with us, or are we choosing in the moment to notice, oh, okay, yes, there is this fear. There's no problem with the fear. I don't need to try and avoid the fear, which is quite often what we do with fear. But I can notice it and go, okay, there is fear. I'm aware of that, and I'm still making a choice to step forward into something maybe that's uncomfortable, because it feels good to do that, because I know that if I'm running away, that's not going to feel good. And that's starting to discern the difference between what is my truth in this moment. And sometimes, absolutely, truth might be to walk away. But we don't know that if we're not paying attention, if we're not listening to our body, if we're not noticing what the emotions are, if we're not feeling our body and seeing where we're holding back and where we're moving. We're not seeing if we're playing out some kind of game. And a lot of what we do is playing games, typically around some sort of power, going back to ego. I need to feel like I'm worthy, like I'm better than someone else, that I'm eligible to be here, and we're going to do a whole lot of stuff that tries to set that up and prove it. Now, if we're not noticing, we don't know it's happening, and that rules our life. The moment we start to notice, And another way of looking at that is that we start to shine a light on it, we expose it. Sometimes it just drops away, and sometimes it's just about giving us the choice to go, okay, I see. Don't necessarily need to understand, but at least I'm aware of it. I'm acknowledging it. I'm allowing myself into the feeling. And if I can allow myself into the feeling, I don't have to get overwhelmed. And that gives me a little bit more grounding to step towards whatever is my truth.
So, when people do offer sessions, what is, what can that look like? I mean, I'm imagining there's often a whole lot of emotional content that people are bringing, and various
Yes.
different, like a lot of unconscious, repressed material. So, I mean, what's the direction of that? Like, where would a person, somebody who's offering sessions, how might they begin to work with that beyond just the awareness piece? Like, what else is the work, or
Well,
what's the journey?
a lot of that's getting into embodiment. So when I spoke about the counseling course and then getting into Tantra, the thing that attracted to me to that was that it wasn't an analysis, it wasn't a mental working out, it was getting into the body, getting into real experience. So things that one could experience in a session would be a breathing meditation, something that works consciously with the breath. Starting to feel that in the body, using the breath as a way to open up the body. When we start to open up the body, it can very easily activate emotions, energies that want to move. And the direction with that always is that's welcome, that's invited. There's nothing wrong with emotion, nothing wrong with feeling it. It needs to be felt. Typically, when we've got something emotional happening within us, it's an aspect of us that's wanting to be heard. There's something in pain. And if something's in pain, what do we do with it? If it's a small child in front of us that's in pain, and the very natural inclination is to go, how can I help you? Can I hold you? Would you like a cuddle? There's a gentleness. And if that's just held, a little child that's crying, the crying will pass at some point, and they might even get to a point where they can express, this is what's happening for me, or this is what I'd like. The tendency with ourselves is we see the emotion and we go, oh, I can't handle that now. Let's just block it, suppress it. And then it typically comes out in some other way, which is often regrettable. So it might come out as an anger or a violence towards someone that we then feel bad about later and feel guilty. So in sessions, we welcome the emotion, and anything that's going to bring that on is great. Meditation, breathing would be one thing. I work a lot with dance, music and dance. Music is very evocative in terms of accessing feelings, very expressive. There's different ways of getting people to move in their body that'll give them access to different levels of awareness. So just something like noticing whether one is moving in a stiff manner. Obviously, there's a holding there. Why so stiff? Is there an opportunity to let the body relax and to extend further and to discover new ways of moving that perhaps we don't know? You can immediately relate that back into life and go, well, where else does this happen? Does it happen in your job? Does it happen in your relationship? Do you keep doing the same thing again and again with a certain stiffness or rigidity that doesn't allow something new to take place, a way of exploring into the unexpected and the unknown?
So, what do you think? Like, I mean, I'm just thinking that we've been kind of stuck in this very limited kind of patriarchal system where sexuality has got very stuck rules, I suppose you could say, about how it expresses itself. Um, so what, I mean, do we have new avenues and new pathways of sexuality that can be explored now, or what, you know, I suppose
Absolutely.
that, because the question is, it's like, if for me, it's like, okay, if my sexuality is expressing itself in a direction, then I tend to get afraid of rejection, or think that um, it's kind of like it goes into old behaviors and old patterns and roles and stuff like that. So, I'm just wondering, like, what else is there? You know what I mean? Like, in terms of
Absolutely.
expression.
Yes. I think for me, what comes up there with the most ferociousness, I guess, almost, is where we direct our sexuality. Is it something that's directed outside of ourselves and becomes about someone else or about an experience, or a way in which we need to please or get pleased by someone else, versus how do we take that completely into ourselves, direct our sexuality into our own bodies, and make it entirely our own power so that it's not about someone else. And that doesn't mean that we don't then share it with someone else. But when it's totally owned and our sexuality is entirely within our own power, we're not dependent on someone else for any kind of pleasure or satisfaction, and they're not dependent on us. So suddenly all those expectations can drop away, and the ideas around what's right or what's wrong can start to drop away, and we can be fully in our own expression and share that beautifully with someone else without diminishing them, without diminishing ourselves in any manner whatsoever. And I think that's quite beautiful. And I believe that women's sexual power is awesome and immense, and it's been locked down for a very long time, and I think it's crying to come out. And I think it's a very scary place. I've heard from many women that they're afraid of overpowering men, of frightening them away with their sexuality, of being judged because they're too much in their sexual power and they've got all this energy and they don't know where to channel it. And it's almost like they're going to explode something, if not the men themselves.
I know, my friend always says that women are like in their essence a raw power,
Absolutely,
and
absolutely.
that they kind of need to work with containment and often look towards men for that containment. You can't often find men you can contain that, because it's devastating, in a way.
You don't want to contain it. You try and contain it, the container's going to rip apart. It's not for me about containing it as such. The containment is something that happens within, and it's not a limiting of it. It's just a being firmly connected into what your truth is, what your being is, remembering who you are. And if you firmly implanted in that, then you can swing out as wide as you like and explore into new space. That's the going into the unknown, and something that certainly the feminine qualities of us are extremely good at doing. Being able to process emotionally can go out into the extremes of the unknown and do that. But it needs an anchor, and the anchor isn't necessarily another person or another man. Most beautifully, a man's going to be, let's say, holding the space when they allow a woman to go into the rawness and into the wild and into the fullness of that expression without judging it, without trying to contain it. And in that way, perhaps there's a feeling of being seen and being honored in that expression. If a man's trying to contain it, they're trying to limit it, and we're going to feel less than. We're going to feel like we're being edited, that if I'm in the fullness of my expression, that it's not okay for another person because they can't handle it. Well, I think we're at a time where both men and women very urgently need to learn how to handle it. And a lot of that is taking it back into themselves.
It's interesting that the kind of idea of balancing all these different roles, and different expressions in life, because I think that, from what I've seen, it's quite, like the way that perhaps even my own sexuality has been expressed has probably goes between like what could you say, like the courtesan, or the, like I'm now, the sex goddess, this kind of thing. But then, you know there's a lot of other roles that get compromised in that, so what I'm trying to say is it's almost like men, or my idea is that men want a certain thing from women. They want a certain role. They want this this kind of whore, role. They want this wild, uncontained sexual woman, can like they can break themselves onto, and like get messed up by and be reborn through and all this kind of thing. But then when it when it comes to the other side, which is like mothering, or being taken care of, so maybe the wounded child, then it's much harder for them to meet that place. Maybe because of their own wounding around, I don't know. I mean, I'm just opening it up for thought.
Mm, mm,
I mean,
yeah.
what do you think about that? Do you think that men, on the whole, can do all the roles, or they're just working on it, or I don't know?
Yeah, I think we do need to be able to do all the roles because we are all the roles. We have all these aspects in us, and we can recognize all these aspects in other people. And at certain times, some of them are more in profile than others, and others are perhaps resting or a little bit further back. But it changes. And if anyone's wanting to hold anyone else in one specific role, then they're not seeing that other person. What they're doing is they've got an idea that they're projecting onto that other person. And of course, then they're going to get really angry as soon as they see another aspect coming through. And that's not really seeing the other person. That's not allowing them. That's again coming back to containment. Is here's this picture of you in one particular role, and you need to stay in that, and I'm not going to accept anything else. Well, where's the fullness of that other person, and how does that even honor ourselves? As men or women, we've got these different aspects to ourselves. I'm a lover and I'm a father. I'm both, and they exist in me at the same time. But sometimes the father aspect is going to come out a lot stronger when it's needed. And then other aspects, the lover is going to come out a lot stronger. And then there'll be another time when the warrior is there. So I'm not wanting to suppress any of them really, or even define myself as particularly aligned to anyone. They're all there. And some of them are dark and scary.
Sorry, someone's ringing the bell. I'm not going to get it. Yeah, so that idea of all the various different archetypes, I suppose, with the idea of totality, in a sense, it's like we're trying to open up that the range of expression, I suppose, to be many things. But I mean, Tantra, in one sense, is connected to sexuality and working with sexuality as a part of the discipline, but it's not the whole thing, is it?
It's not the whole thing, no. It's like my example with the food. Um, in that sense, sexuality is a reflection of life. And it happens to be a very edgy one. And from a Tantra point of view, if one has a determination to start working with what is in our unconscious and to make it conscious and to become more present in each moment, sexuality is just a very convenient place to look because of all the societal pressures on it and the judgments and everything else. There's a lot held there. We want to uncover the unconscious. Sexuality is very quickly going to do that. It is edgy. People have a lot that they're holding around it. they are running from it. So there's a lot to learn there. And what quite often happens, though, is as soon as you go into it, it becomes about something else entirely. So what can look like, say, fulfilling the role of courtesan, prostitute, kind of raging sex goddess, whatever that is, if one is to consciously go, okay, well, I'm going to play into that and I'm going to exaggerate a little bit and tap into that feeling, what might happen is that you might reveal, and I'm not saying this is the truth of it, this is just an example, some deep desire to just be acknowledged and recognized, perhaps from a time in childhood when you weren't. So, wow, it looks like on the one level we're working with sexuality, and then in the next second we're working with some very deep childhood trauma where we were not acknowledged or we were rejected in some way, and we've carried that on into our adulthood, and we've never had the opportunity to really feel that and to own it. And to find that place within ourselves where we actually hold ourselves as whole and complete and capable and magnificent, rather than there's something wrong with us that we need to fix. So in that sense, it's got nothing to do with sexuality. The sexuality is just a portal. It's an entry point. It's a plethora of very valuable insights that we can gain. But there is a degree to which sexuality does start playing a role. And that's the natural life force energy that flows through our body.
Yeah, I mean, my experience is that, sexuality is an extremely powerful place to be together with another person and, travel infinitely, you know what I mean? It's like cosmic, doorway, gateway opening, that kind of thing. Beautiful experience. But I mean, it is an interesting place and time, just in terms of, I think, women reviewing their roles and men reviewing their roles and looking at, what does conscious sexuality mean now? I mean, I think it's just it's so unconscious still, Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And oh my gosh, you and I both come from an explosion of orgasmic bliss of two people making love in sexual energy. We all do. That was the moment of our conception.
Yeah, well, you can hope it was orgasmic explosion of bliss. It's not always that for everybody.
That's true.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting in itself, like what energy, sexual energy were you conceived in, and what were your parents thinking, when you were born, and the role of the mind and fantasy in our genetic imprints, and a lot of things. Like I'm really interested in how people are largely unaware of the fact that their thoughts and their fantasies have an imprint in their psyche, and interesting to look at, the ancestral stuff around that, like what was your father or your mother fantasizing about, for example, what was their unfulfilled desires, because in family constellations it's like, well, if you don't make that conscious, then you just end up taking on your parents'
That's
unfinished
right,
business
yes.
somehow, so that's all, I suppose, all interesting part of the work. I don't know if you want to say anything about that.
Yeah, so I mean, I think the pertinent part there is the fantasies. And if one way of accessing what it is that we're holding in our unconscious and what's looking for some sort of release or transmutation, whatever you want to call it, is to look at our fantasies, look at where the desires are, and find some way to explore it. It's has a tendency to uncover things and release things. Again, this is where that it looks like sexuality, but maybe it's not. Is there's a desire to do something or experience something or be in a certain way, and when we explore it, sometimes some of that gets expressed and released. We don't always know necessarily where it comes from. Certainly, it feels like sometimes that's coming from way, way back. And it doesn't even have to be sexuality. We explore this a lot in dance. So I had an experience for about a month or so ago. I was dancing. I was struggling with the music. I was struggling with the instruction. So my awareness of that struggle was to go, okay, let's come back and be present with my body, be present with my breathing, relax, and just allow it to come out. And in the expression of the dance, just letting my body move how it wanted to without thinking about what I should be doing. I went into what felt like a hanging. It's as though I had just been hung. It's very difficult to say, is that real, is it not real, what it was, but it was certainly a very powerful experience in my body, and something got released in it. There was an emotional side to it, and I was crying, I was releasing. Very, very powerful. And that came from just allowing my body to do what it wanted to do, and to trust that and follow it with full allowing and full willingness to feel everything.
And I think part of the healing, I guess, is also the way that the people that are in your environment might hold you in that moment.
Certainly. There's an aspect of safety. So if I'm not feeling that it's okay for me to break down, there's a possibility that I might not, and I might put it aside. And if I'm not aware of that, then it just becomes stored still for a later time. If I am aware of it, I've got the chance to go, okay, let me move into a space where it is okay for me to break down and to feel it. Let me move into the company of people that I know won't judge it and will support me in that releasing, and let it be felt. And this is the beauty of starting to develop that watching yourself, that witness aspect, is that we can start to make these choices so that we don't keep them stuck in our bodies. And if it's not stuck in our bodies, then that sexual life force energy that flows through us has a chance to flow more freely and to express more freely, so that when we're moving about with a greater sense of power and a greater readiness to face whatever life brings us.
And Stephen, what is your opinion, anyway, you could say, on the idea of that the woman, kind of as the incarnation of the goddess energy in the Tantra work, is supposed to almost take a leadership role, or needs to, and that ties into the idea of asking for what you need, these kinds of ideas. What's your take on that?
Regardless of whether you woman or man, that's just a good practice. That's again becoming aware of where we are and what's going on, and what our needs are, and learning how to express those in the confidence of not feeling judged, and also being okay that maybe it's not met. That's a practice we all need to start developing. I wouldn't say that that's specific to the feminine at all. In terms of taking the lead, I prefer to think of it more at the level of the feminine and the masculine energy. So not necessarily about woman and not necessarily about man. Yes, of course, in those different forms we are representing those. But where I like to move with Tantra and working with people is that we start to take these energies into ourselves. And we're not just, me as a man, I'm not just working with a masculine energy. I'm developing both my feminine energies and my masculine energies. And I want them both developed because they both bring different strengths and different possibilities. And even more beautiful when they're working together and working in synergy, communicating. Because there's a sense that things on their own can do so much, but when you bring two things together, what is possible through that union is far greater than the two things independently. And that's what we're wanting to work with. Now, the sense of taking the lead from the feminine, I was talking earlier about that being rooted in what we know, being able to come back to ourselves, and from that place of strength that we can then go out into the unknown. It's the feminine that goes out. It's the feminine that has access to the information that comes from the unknown. The masculine is the one that's holding that presence, keeping things rooted and connected, and providing that source of safety, and also the place where inspiration can come through. But the feminine needs to be able to go out into the unknown. And this is why I work with the concept of chaos. If we stay with what we know, we're just going to keep doing the same things again and again. When we encounter a problem, it is a problem because it sits outside of what we know. If we want to find a solution to that, we need to go outside of what we know. And that typically is into the unknown, which tends to be a chaotic space. It's the feminine's capacity for feeling and for expanding that does that and brings that new knowledge back into the awareness of the masculine.
It's interesting because the way that women have, the place that women have come through, it being the past, it's been very much the opposite of that dynamic, where the male goes out into the world and the woman stays and holds the space as such. And so it's quite, I mean, it's just nice to hear it even, you know, that there's this shift in a way, in awareness that's coming through for everybody, that the woman, the feminine can sort of move again into the unknown. Like we're moving into the space of this new era, you know, where obviously the feminine is coming into power again, but into an equal power, a new power. So yeah, it's just, you know, it's just good to hear it, and obviously that's the work. That's the work, and I love the idea of chaos. I think it's wonderful. Not that chaos is the easiest thing to necessarily always manage for the personality, but my understanding and my work is around, you know, as we shift from one state or one order to another, you know, we kind of go through we go through chaos, but chaos is an energizing state as well. You know, it's like if you're so done with one direction or one flow or one expression or one role or whatever, and you're just ready for something new, and you change the direction. It's like spinning water in a bucket in one direction, spinning it in another. There's chaos between the two directions, you know, but there's all this life force that gets released in that chaos.
That's right. You know? That's right.
And so it's like, well, these windows, these various windows that we look through, and as we look through and change, like the shape-shifting idea really appeals to me. You know, as we shape-shift into various different forms, if we can be free with that, then we are gaining our freedom, really. You know, but there is chaos between every shift.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's for me, that talks to flow, being able to flow with things, being able to shift and adjust and meet whatever it is that we encounter. If we're too rigid, then we shatter. And I think anyone who is afraid of chaos and afraid of change and is overwhelmed by the fears will certainly relate to that feeling of shattering, of being broken. And that's what happens when something's rigid. It doesn't move. We need flexibility. We need to be able to adjust and change and respond and move with what's happening. Because if we don't, it's a struggle. It's a battle. It's like trying to, you know, the salmon do it well, but we don't, trying to swim upstream. It's much easier to go with the flow of the water. If we're resisting it, fighting it, it's going to use up all of our energy. and there's going to be a lot of uncomfortable feelings that come up. Very different experience to when we go, okay, so here's the chaos, it's happening. I invite the chaos in the sense, not that I go out specifically seeking it, but I know that when, as you said, when the change happens, there is an element of chaos, there is a disturbance that happens, and if I can be willing to move with that and open myself up to the new possibility without holding back onto whatever my previous idea was, well then magic happens. It's a place of miracles. We open up to the new. And we don't know what the new is at this point. We only know it once we're experiencing it.
Yeah, lots of thoughts kind of going past at once as I'm listening to you. That idea of the space of magic versus feelings, that was the one thing that I wanted to talk about, or as well as feelings. And the other thing was tied to, maybe it's the same point, like the shattering. A lot of people say that, you know, as they come into doing the work with Tantra, it's preceded by a kind of shattering. And I think that sometimes it's, you know, perhaps a shattering of I don't know, an illusion of the past. I don't really know what that shattering is. I mean, I think I'm just trying to think for me what it was, but I have definitely had that experience. I think it is a bit of an ego shattering, like and perhaps kind of a hiding in the intellect type shattering. It's shattering when you don't, when you think you know a lot, and you realize that you know nothing.
Exactly right.
So ego and
Exactly
intellect
right.
has a terrible, deathly shattering in that experience.
Yes. That was very much my own experience as well. I was sitting doing an exercise, someone opposite me, and suddenly in that moment I saw that the difficulties that I faced in my life were as a result of the ideas that I was holding and the way that I was being very rigid to them. And and suddenly I had to take responsibility for the suffering that I was experiencing, that it was actually my own creating. And suddenly all these ideas about how the world worked and how things were supposed to be and how people were supposed to behave, particularly in relation to me, suddenly all those ideas had absolutely no grounding. It fell away. And I became empty, which was not necessarily a pleasant experience. But the beauty of it is that it opened me up to something new. And certainly that sense of suddenly now taking responsibility for what it is that I think and put out there into the world, that actually a lot of my experience is directly related to that. So best I be very careful with what I'm thinking about, what I'm choosing to direct my energy towards. It was beautiful.
Yeah, wow, it's amazing, and it's so interesting how because in a way you hear people speak about Tantra being the path of sort of like a rapid enlightenment. You know, path for those that are serious about their enlightenment. You know, um, and there's obviously that concept around looking at what is taboo and where you are bonded to yourself and your image, and looking at how to shatter that. I mean, that's one way of saying it. Doesn't have to be so dramatic, but you know, how to melt it down, how to I don't know, break it apart. You know, what are your thoughts? I mean, I'm just interested in even with the Dances with Chaos work. Where did the name even come from?
It's I had a sense of the importance of chaos again from an early age. I some part of me knew that if everything was going all well and fine and I wasn't paying attention, then something was going to be shaken up very quickly. So I think in that I already had a sense that there was something perfectly natural in chaos. It was real. It did happen. You couldn't be blind to it. And then the term "dances with chaos" is a slight play on the title of the book, "Dances with Wolves." And for me, has an energy of being, okay, well, I'm willing, I'm ready. Let me dance with it. I'm not going to fight it. It's not a fight. It's not a battle. I'm not going to try and control chaos. I'm going to dance with it. There's something elegant about dancing. There's a sharing of power that happens when you're not resisting and you moving with as opposed to against. And perhaps this is why now I work with dance as well. The actual working with dance came a lot later than the name Dances with Chaos.
And Stephen, there's this just so interesting, so passionate about these topics. The whole idea, I want to just touch on it a little bit, linked to so the idea of the Dakini is the feminine form that does the work, the embodiment of the feminine, right?
Yes.
And there's a concept in the Tantra work called the Dakini download.
Right.
So now I'm interested in the link between the kind of shape-shifting work, how, we are not what we appear to be. We're not this identity. We're not this face. We're all faces. We're kind of form and formlessness. So that's the one thing. And, just, I suppose, how it links into, wow, there's a lot here. Maybe this will have to be for another interview. I do the work with people in family constellations a lot, where I get people to choose kind of where it is that what it is they'd like to experience. So they kind of get to design their face, you could say, or design their shape. And then, because I understand that consciousness is everywhere, and we are all things. So it's only a matter of really putting our attention on it, becoming present with it, that we can start to download it. So in a sense, I think that's kind of almost like a Dakini download. It's just a different format, that we access consciousness all the time.
Yeah.
We access information.
Yes. I think what I'm hearing in that is what is spoken about as being the reflection. That as a sentient being, everything that I experience is reflecting something of me. And if I'm being aware of it, if I'm taking that experience into here rather than going outside for that experience, then it is all simply a reflection of me. Because this is my experience. Everything that happens is my experience, something happening within me. So in all of that, I'm going to find out something about what this me is. I certainly have a very limited idea, but I'm going to get clues through everything that's reflected back to me. The Dakini download, I must start by saying that it's a new term for me, and so what I put onto it is my own idea. For me, these terms, they've got definitions or meanings that are commonly understood. So in that respect, I tend to move away from terms where I can, unless there is a common understanding. So perhaps it's not that, but certainly there's another aspect that's specific to the Dakini, where the Dakini for me is someone who is going to call your truth. They're going to challenge you on it. They're going to work with you around your truth, and be very willing to be that reflection that we were talking about. You can get reflections from all things, but a Dakini working in a session context or not is going, I'm going to very willingly reflect back to you. The download part, what maybe talk about my own experience working with my teacher. There was a very definite sense of an energy download that happened. Something that was almost felt as though it was communicated through her. So just in her working with me and starting to teach me about energy, so I was starting to access the energies in my body and increase those energies. And then there was a point where something just switched. And it felt very much like there was a transmission that happened from her to me. And I've experienced that in the opposite way as well, and that I've experienced what seems to be where perhaps I've transmitted something to other people as well. I don't know that I'm doing. I can't feel it in my own body, but I'm seeing it as a reflection back of what they're experiencing, where they've gone from one state suddenly into an energetic state that they have not known before.
Yeah.
It's very powerful. It's very direct. It's very immediate, and it seems to have the effect of something is forever changed.
Amazing. It's really amazing work. And I mean, it's interesting linked to the sort of shape-shifting energy, because it's almost like, for me, we have our human experience, which has kind of various roles to it, and then we have these kind of, you could call them like a higher archetypal form or state, which is much less personal. It's more of an impersonal state, I guess, which is where we're less in our human state, where we kind of either worried about what people think, or trying to position ourselves according to our fears or whatever. There's that shift into something archetypal, and I'm just interested in that link to your name, Rayven, and how that is possibly an archetypal form that you work with, and if there's anything that you want to say about that. And then we kind of we'll have to wrap it up soonish, because it's kind of coming to the top of an hour, and that's enough for one, but there'll definitely be time for more. But I don't know if you want to talk about the name a little bit.
Certainly. I mean, the name Rayven came to me. I was playing around with the phonetics of my given name at birth, and it popped out of that, and it felt very relevant. Not necessarily knowing exactly what the archetype of Rayven is, I just trusted that it was relevant, and I've been working with it for a couple of years, and it's very possible that it might change at some point as well. But it feels like in working with it as a name, that there is something of whatever it is archetypically that I then work with as well. And certainly aspects of that I can identify with is the Rayven can sometimes be associated with the trickster. It's something I use on myself a lot. So for me to develop my own awareness and to get into experiences, I quite often have to trick myself into it. I will arrive at a workshop and go, wow, okay, how did I get here? um, and then I have a fantastic experience. But just to get through my own resistance, sometimes the trickster is very useful. There's a creation aspect, and certainly in some of the Native American myths around Rayven. And I think there's a death aspect as well, which I haven't worked a lot with death, but I'm certainly aware of it, and I'm aware of its power. In the dance I did this last Wednesday, which was working with the topic of new beginnings, death was brought into that. New beginnings comes after quite often a death of something that is past. So yeah, I think there's a lot in Raven. I think there's more to be explored. Um, and yeah, I'll know more as it unfolds.
All right. Well, it's been amazing talking to you. It's good to find out a little bit more of your experience. And we're going to be running this course together, which is great. I'm excited about it.
Yes,
Um, who knows, hey? For both of us, it's brand new territory,
yes,
which part of my mission at the moment is into the unknown, because I think that, this year, in a way, 2014, is about reinventing ourselves. It really is about allowing that feminine, that explorer, that new experience to be brought in. And so, like, for all of us to just just go, down that unknown road and just see what happens.
and play as well. It's an exciting journey of discovery and adventure. The catch is, of course, is that sometimes it's uncomfortable, and we have to be willing to feel that. But if we are, then amazing stuff is possible.
All right, well, good talking to you. And how do people get hold of you if they want a session, by the way?
So this morning I realized that my contact form on my website was not working. It is now.
What is your website?
My website is danceswithchaos.com,
Okay.
and you can also email info@danceswithchaos.com, and there's also a Facebook page, also called Dances with Chaos. So either of those methods, people can get hold of me.
Okay, great. And just to put in a little plug for our workshop, we're going to do something called Karma Burns. No, not Karma Burns, Karma Sutra, which is a
I'm a
play
suit.
on the Karma Sutras and the Karma Burn remedy, which the medicine Buddhas are busy with in Cape Town. And the idea is to work with Tantra as a discipline to help people let go of the past patternings, and ways that we're holding ourselves, maybe unresolved, unfinished business around sexuality, possibly, and come into a whole new expression. So we'll see how we go.
Yes, and I'm seeing that as being a gentle introduction to Tantra. I think there's a lot to work with.
No
I've
wild
certainly
group
been working
sex,
with it for many
unfortunately.
years. No wild group sex, and if there's any disappointment that's not going to be there, I think I invite that disappointment to be there and to be expressed.
Ah, all
But we will certainly
righty.
have some fun.
Yeah, we'll have a lot of fun. All right, so lovely to chat to you again, and we'll see you in the group in the next couple of days.
Fantastic. I look forward to it.
Okay,
Thank you very
thanks
much.
a lot, Tay. Bye
Bye
bye.
bye.